Welcome to Taiwan Insider. I am Natalie Tso, and I'm here with Nury Turkel. He is a prominent activist and spokesperson for the Uyghur people. This is his new book, No Escape, the true story of China's genocide against the Uyghurs. Now today I'm going to be talking with him about the plight of the Uyghurs, but the United Nations just put out a human rights report confirming the evidence of torture and human rights abuses against the Uyghur people. And he tells us what he thinks of that report and what should be done from here.
First of all, now since UN has taken a position, finally, I'd like to see emergency session called on right away. At the UN Human Rights Council, they need 16 member states to agree on. We need an emergency session. I cannot imagine any country locks up its 1 million Muslim population will be seeing this kind of a reaction. It's a disgrace. The UN need to do what it's supposed to do under the UN mandate. And I anticipate and I expect and I urge Guterres, Secretary General, to make a public statement. The way that Michelle Bachelet releasing this report on her way out the door is, excuse my language, cowardly. This should have been released a long time ago. That could have saved lives. This is still a helpful report, but I can't imagine that we would have this endless debate, academic discussion today if the UN released this report 2 years ago, even mildly calling it as a crimes against humanity. 2 years, a long time. We knew that this report was in existence. I even wrote a letter to Michelle Bachelet asking her to release it way back. Even after the US government recognized this atrocity as a genocide, the UN still did not move. The other thing that I would like to see UN doing is to encourage its members to take a position. The struggle is so complicated. This whole thing involving China on this particular issue is very complicated and it's massive. And the United States cannot do this alone. And we need to have a strong voice in the UN representation. In 2019, during the annual General Assembly, US organized with the support of Canada, UK, Netherlands, France, side events. This is a perfect opportunity. This month we will have UNGA. That's an acronym for UN General Assembly in New York. The key members, the Western liberal democracies in particular, use this opportunity to highlight this report. If calling for emergency sessions in Parliament. We have done it. In 2009, I took part in the side events organized, hosted by the US government. It was very, very effective. Canada maybe could do this, show leadership. Australia could do it. So the point that I'm trying to make is that people should start feeling indifferent about this in a societal level and a governmental level. Elie Wiesel has this powerful line that I always remind myself and others. Our silence is a tacit approval.
Are you hopeful that there will be further action?
I can't speak for the United States government because this is still being discussed, and I anticipate more actions, targeted sanctions on individuals and entities. Sanctions takes effect slowly. It's not overnight thing. Even in the case of Russia, with this serious sanctions being imposed on Russia, at least 100 global brands pulling out, suspending their business practice. We have not have evidence yet it has been really, really worked. And these regimes, same is true with Beijing, never go out and said, oh, we've been hurt by sanctions led by the United States. But their language, their pushback, their retaliation is very telling. I think the sanctions imposed by both the previous and current administration has been effective. There is a company called Huafu. It's a major yarn supplier. Complained it's in its Shenzhen stock exchange filing, that they lost $100 million in just 1 year. And they're pointing the finger at U.S. government, saying that because of the U.S. sanctions, companies are canceling orders. They're already feeling it. So this has been targeted sanction, but the next run should be sanctioning of the network. Same thing as in Russia. If you don't go after the network, it will not be effective. So that's where in one area that I am seeing some hope. The other area I am optimistic, cautiously optimistic, is that we may see some movement in the forced labor, because the U.S. government in the last G7 and recent G7, President Biden took the issue to G7. I never thought that Uyghur issue, Uyghur human rights, would be part of the G7 agenda. I attended a debriefing in both events, and I was pleased to hear that the addressing Uyghur forced labor was on the agenda. And you can, if you look at the pledge that the G7 members made, proves that. I wish the German and France allowed it to be in the joint communique, but there's a sense of within the G7 community that they have to address this together. Then Secretary Blinken is doing a great job rallying support for them.
The whole interview will be up on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter.
The Michelin Guide started publishing its list of the best restaurants in Taiwan 5 years ago. First, the guide evaluated restaurants in Taipei, then it went to Taichung, and this year it went to southern Taiwan, evaluating restaurants in Tainan and Kaohsiung. Here's a look at this year's winners.
Michelin 2022指南的 3-star Michelin restaurant, 3颗星的。
For the 5th year in a row, the Michelin Guide recognized Taipei's Le Palais as a 3-star restaurant. That's the guide's highest honor. Since 2018, the esteemed guide has evaluated restaurants in Taiwan. This year is special though because it's the first year eateries in southern Taiwan's Tainan and Kaohsiung cities were included. Previously, only Taipei and central Taiwan's Taichung were given consideration. Michelin's commercial director in Taiwan, Jay Mao, says Tainan is a historical city with a rich legacy. Kaohsiung, on the other hand, is a port city that has melded the many flavors of Taiwan. Many of this year's Michelin star winners are repeats from past years. Danny's Steakhouse, Golden Formosa, Kicho, Sushi Nomura, and Yake in Taipei have successfully retained their 1-star rating for 5 years running. Additions from Kaohsiung include Show and Liberté. Unfortunately, no restaurant in Tainan, which is often seen as a food capital in Taiwan, received any stars. But that's no reason to fret. The Michelin Guide has been in Taiwan for half a decade now, and it doesn't seem like it's going anywhere. Restaurants all over Taiwan most certainly have a shot next year.
Next up in Hashtag Taiwan, I tell you about Chinese drones flying over Taiwan's Jingmen Islands.
Things between Taiwan and China right now are pretty tense. At the beginning of this month, US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi came to Taiwan for a surprise visit. Now that ruffled China's feathers, and after Pelosi left, China started conducting unprecedented military drills close to Taiwan. Then, the US sent even more high-level officials to Taiwan as if to tell China to back off, but China's still selling ships and flying planes close to Taiwan. And now, there's a new variable in the mix: unmanned aerial vehicles, or drones. Let's start off with a quick geography lesson. Now, when you think of Taiwan, you probably only think about the main island, the big one. But Taiwan includes many smaller outlying islands. One group of them are the Jinmen Islands, which are less than 10 kilometers away from the coast of China. Now, if you don't know how close that is, let's just say the two are close enough to see each other. Now, this whole point is to illustrate that there are parts of Taiwan and China that are very close together. Close enough for drones to fly over the ocean and see the other side. And that's exactly what happened. On August 16th, a photo of 2 Taiwanese soldiers taken from above a military outpost on Jinmen started circulating on Chinese social media. And unlike other photos depicting Chinese soldiers close to Taiwan, which were proven to be fake, this one was confirmed real. Now, according to the military, it has regularly reported sightings of Chinese civilian and military drones flying near Jinmen since the beginning of the year. But since this photo started circulating online, it has sparked a very valid debate. If Chinese civilian drones can take pictures of Taiwanese soldiers this close, what else can they see? Well, it's not far-fetched to think that they can scope out Taiwan's military installations, hardware setups, and with today's high-resolution technology, sensitive materials. So even though this isn't a completely new occurrence in Taiwan, it has turned heads. People are realizing how problematic this is, and they're saying we need to do something about this pronto. The government says it's going to install an anti-drone system on Jinmen and another close-by island, Mazu, in 2023. But some say that's not enough. The government has released its 4-step process for dealing with foreign drones. Number 1, it'll fire off warning flares. 2, it'll report the incursion. 3, it'll attempt to drive the drone away. And after that, if all else fails, it'll shoot the drone down. And it happened. The Taiwanese military shot down a Chinese civilian drone. And this is the part where I start getting nervous. Now, these drone incursions are very much gray zone tactics in that they don't pose an immediate threat. However, we are talking about the takedown of hardware. For now, it's civilian, but what happens if it's military? Is it a show of force that can be interpreted as an act of war? Remember, China has gotten angrier for less, so this just might be the reason it's looking for to start something bigger. But at the end of the day, I have assistant professor at Taiwan's National Tsinghua University, Lev Nachman, for putting my mind at ease, as he usually does. Nachman tweeted, "There is some interesting scholarship from political scientists studying if and how drones escalate conflict. This paper finds that drones can actually restrain escalation, something worth keeping in mind with all the sensationalist headlines these days." And with that, I'd like to end today's episode by thanking Mr. Lev Nachman. Dr. Lev Nachman.
And before we go back to the studio for our final question of the week, here's a look at some of the other stories that are on our radar.
According to media reports, US President Joe Biden's administration is planning to propose a $1.1 billion arms sale to Taiwan. The report comes amid sustained tensions in the Taiwan Strait. The package is said to include anti-ship and air-to-air missiles, as well as extending a surveillance radar contract. The sale still needs congressional approval. Meanwhile, the US State Department declines to comment on the matter. Candidates running in November's local elections in Taiwan started officially registering for the race on Monday. But many election campaigns are already in full swing. In fewer than 90 days, voters will elect their county magistrates, mayors, local councilors, as well as village and borough chiefs. The new school year began for Taiwanese schools on Tuesday with many COVID-19 restrictions still in place. But some COVID rules are being relaxed. Currently, classes are suspended for 3 days whenever a student tests positive. But from September 12th, students in affected classes will be able to continue attending school if they present a negative rapid test result.
And we're back in the studio for our final question of the day. And there's not really a question today because we talked about the Michelin Guide in Taipei for 2022. And I just want to ask Natalie. Natalie, have you ever tried a Michelin star restaurant in Taipei?
Yes, when the first one came, Zhou Robishan, I went there and to try it out.
Yeah.
So fancy and very good food. But I have one small complaint. The portions are really tiny.
That's the case with most Michelin star restaurants.
And it's so expensive.
I mean, the Michelin star gives you an automatic markup, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it's like you have to eat tiny little portions like this.
That's
it's delicious, but it's just for the money.
Same deal. I went to one Michelin star restaurant in Taichung. It was called An Da De Rou. I'm not 100% sure what its English name is, but it's a place that imports Japanese high-grade quality A5 Wagyu beef.
Oh.
And they import it like a whole cow at a time.
Wow.
So what you do is you leave it up to the chef and they give you good pieces of meat and then...
What does it taste like? I've never had that beef before.
It escapes description. It's very delicious. And to me, like you said, it's the portions are pretty small, but they are some of the best bites I've ever had, the most memorable bites I've ever had. And, there are a number of other Michelin star restaurants that I still have yet to try. And the problem is, in Taiwan, everybody loves good food, right? So the minute you get a Michelin star on a restaurant, you're never going to get to see
You have to book it way ahead of time.
Like 6 months, just to be safe. Anyway, that's about all the time we have for this edition of Taiwan Insider. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Leslie Liao.
I'm Natalie Tso.
We'll be back with another edition of Taiwan Insider next week. But until then, why not check out our social media? We're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube,
Twitter, and leave a comment below. We'd love to hear from you.
Anyway, guys, until next week, see you around.
Bye.